Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the 10-minute Bible lesson. Our lessons have been about the parables of Jesus. We're working on like the 8th or 9th one. And today we're going to have one that actually has several verses in it. It has so many verses that we're going to have to do it in two parts. And the name of the parable, or what it's called, is the unmerciful servant. Oh, wow, I don't want to be unmerciful to you, but that's the title of the parable. Now, it seems like that Jesus told this parable in response to something that Peter said. What was it that Peter said? Well, let's look at it, because this parable is in Matthew chapter 18, and we're going to begin by reading verses 21 and 22. Here's what Peter said. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. Now I thought that was a pretty cool, because I'm wondering when Peter said to Jesus, because he wanted to know how many times he should forgive his brother. And I'm not thinking he was thinking necessarily about his brother Andrew, but I think he was thinking about his fellow man. That's just kind of my thought on it. But I think that when he said that, I'm just kind of thinking that he was saying it was going to be way more than enough if I forgive him 7 times. Now, before you think about that, I would just like for you to consider this about how hard it is for us to forgive someone, period. I don't know about you, but it's kind of a hard thing for us to do. And I think that sometimes when we do choose to, and we do that, we kind of feel like, well, that's the right thing to do, but better not happen again. And I think that if we had to do it 2 times, it would just be, that's just an awful lot. And then Peter says 7 times, and I'm thinking that, Peter's saying, boy, this is way, way over the top, 7. But before we answer that, here's something that we should consider, and we should ask ourselves, how many times do we want to be forgiven? Now, there's where the answer is. And I believe that's why Jesus said 70 times 7. That's 490 times. That would be more than every day in the year. So I don't know about you, but I need forgiveness every day, every day. Well, I just thought that was interesting. Well, let's go ahead and look and see what Jesus, how he answers Peter in this parable. So he's going to begin this parable in verses 23 and 24. And here's what he said. He said, therefore the kingdom of heaven is like a certain king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. And when he had begun to settle accounts, one was brought to him who owed him 10,000 talents. Now, I can't help but think, since Jesus is saying in this parable, this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. I'm thinking that in this parable that Jesus is talking about, that the king is representative of God. Because listen, we know that God is going to settle accounts as well. In fact, every human being will have to come and appear before God and give an account of himself, and that's called the judgment day. And listen, that's a sobering thought, or at least it should be. Now, the one that Jesus mentions here, this servant that he mentions that owed the king, that is to say, he was indebted to the king, and it wasn't just by a little amount. In fact, what he owed the king was an enormous amount. In fact, it says it was 10,000 talents. Now, I would like to encourage you to do a little research. Listen, and if you can let me know somehow how you come up with and define what a talent is, because I looked around and did a little studying on it, and I understood that it was a weight, an amount of a weight. And there's difference of opinions on it. But one person said it was 75 pounds, 70 to 75 pounds. Now, if that's so, and there's 10,000 talents, so you multiply 75 times 10,000, you get 750,000 pounds. Now, that's almost as much as 4 tons. And if you wanted to break it down even further and think about how many ounces are in a pound, there's 16. And you multiply 16 times 750,000, then you can get an idea of how many ounces it would be. It would be close to 12 million. And if it's measured in silver, and silver is between $20 and $25, you can imagine how much this was. It's an enormous amount of money. But the point of the whole thing is it was so much, it was insurmountable. The debt was just so much that he could not pay. Well, let's go on and let's look and see what Jesus said in verses 25 and 26 of Matthew 18. But as he was not able to pay, the master commanded that he be sold with his wife and children and all that he had, and that payment be made. The servant therefore fell down before him, saying, Master, have patience with me, and I will pay you all. So you've heard of an indentured slave or an indentured servant. That is, they have a debt and they have to work it out and pay. Listen, there was slavery back in these days. And there's always been slavery. And so you'd think that today, it was only today or recently, last 150 years, that there's been slavery. No, there's always been slavery, and all kinds of people have been enslaved. So there was slavery back then. You could be sold if you couldn't pay a debt. You just, hey, listen, we're going to take it, in some way, we'll take it out of your house. We're going to sell you and your wife and your children and everything that you have. Well, I think that's what it said. But notice that's what he was saying. But notice what the man said. What the man did, he fell down before the king and he pleaded and he asked him to have patience with him. And if he would have patience, he said, I'll pay it all. And I thought it was interesting that the man didn't ask for mercy. He didn't ask the king to show him mercy. He asked the king to show him patience and just give him enough time. I'm sorry for laughing, because this man did not have enough time in his life to be able to satisfy this debt. It would just be impossible for him to do that. But I thought it was interesting. He said, if you give me enough patience, then I'll be able to pay. I'll be able to pay all that. But you know what? That couldn't be done. The debt was too great. And I think the point of it is this, that all of us have a debt too great for us to pay. That is to say, we are unable to pay for our debt, and it should make us so thankful that someone has paid the debt for us so that we can be forgiven. Aren't you glad for that? I'm glad. That's the whole point of this. Well, it's not the whole point, but it's one of the main features of this parable. Let's look at the last verse that we're going to look at today. It's verse 27 in Matthew 18. So, then the master of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt. So, obviously, the master represents God. I believe that he does. He's the king. He represents God forgiving us because God has compassion on you and me. He's forgiven us our debt. It was a debt of sin that we owed him. And I'm so thankful that it was Jesus who paid for our debt. Where did he do that? He did that on the cross. Now we know that in the scriptures it says that the wages of sin is death. So that's the debt. The debt is sin, because the wages that we accrue for our sin debt have to be paid, and that's what Jesus did on the cross. He paid the sin debt, and when he died on the cross, he said these words, "It is finished." That is, the debt has been paid and been paid in full. So we're thankful for that, aren't we? It's been completely taken care of. So listen, we are going to be able to do all of the parable today. We're going to stop there. We're going to pick up next time on part 2. So part 2 is going to tell us what this unmerciful servant did. And I think you're going to find it interesting. But we appreciate you joining us today and hoping that you'll tune in next time as well.